Hello and welcome to Be the Wolf. I am here today with Jeff Glauser, and we're going to talk about some stuff that some of you may have experienced in your life, some imposter syndrome, and the struggle for success. And we're going to reframe what success really is because I think a lot of people out there are looking at success as I have to make millions and millions of dollars. 40, 30, 20 years ago, even we were like, I need to make $1 million. Now I feel like if you're in business, $1 million in revenue is like, where did it all go? But Jeff, why don't you introduce yourself and we'll dive into your story right off the bat.
Sounds great. Janaea, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to share my story. And if I can add value in any way, shape, or form, then that in and of itself is a success. So the success is happening in real time, which is fantastic. So, as you had alluded to, when it comes to that word, what I've learned, and perhaps pretty recently, that revelation has really sunk in is that success truly is a mindset. So, for most of my life, I spent a lot of time chasing the shiny object. To give you a little background, as far as my career, my aspirations, growing up, I knew real early on that I wanted to be involved with sports with a subset of maybe the entertainment industry. So I was a latchkey kid, watched a lot of TV. On that TV was oftentimes a lot of sports, a lot of shows, a lot of movies, and it was also my escapism. I had a bit of a rough upbringing. My father passed away at a young age. My mom struggled at times as a single parent can, and struggled at school to kind of fit in and adapt. So seeing others on TV, whether they be playing a sport or playing a part, it allowed me to live vicariously through them. And it inspired me to try to pursue that same path. But by the time I got to high school, from an athletic perspective, I started realizing that I wasn't necessarily genetically fit or cut out to be an athlete. I was a little too short, too slow, too small, too winded easily. So I decided to pivot because around that same time, I also started leaning into writing, journaling, in fact. That was my way of having an outlet to get a lot of these pent up feelings and emotions and all these things that happen, pre and post pubescence and adolescence, some sort of outlet to share. And I got a lot of accolades from that, from my
Mm.
teachers. So it kind of reinforced it. The next best thing, if I couldn't be an athlete, I figured was to write about sports. And that's basically what that path looked like post high school. So went to school for journalism, did all the things I was supposed to do, became sports editor of the school newspaper. I wound up becoming the editor in chief as well. I interned at the local paper. I went to school in Jacksonville. And the timing was great too, because my first year at JU was the Jacksonville Jaguars' first year. So it was almost like we were growing up together in that space. And by my second year at school, I was on the field, in the locker room, in the press box. Mind you, I'm a 19-year-old snot-nosed kid still.
Right.
And probably my first experience of imposter syndrome as well, where at any given moment, I'm waiting for some usher to put his hand on my shoulder and say, kid, you don't belong here. Fortunately, it never happened, but I cut my teeth in it. And it was just further validation that this is what I wanted to do.
Okay.
I was a kid in a candy store.
Let's stop at this point because I want to
Let's do
highlight
it.
a couple of things. Right. So, as latchkey kids or kids who spend a lot of time alone when we're growing up, that time period, there were a lot of us kids, most kids don't experience that these days. But in the TV, right, your brain brought up on the TV and you're seeing these ideas of what success is. It's these professional athletes. It's right. You were probably watching some MTV as well.
Oh, absolutely.
So you've got the actors, the professional athletes, and the musicians, and mom's working her butt off being a single mom. Yeah.
She did her best for sure.
Yeah. So you're in the situation where you're like, well, I don't want that. But
Mhm.
here are these other glorious things that I want. And so I think TV really frames what success is for a lot of people, especially a lot of people who are growing up around people who are middle class or lower middle class. It's this idea of what I have is not what I want. So this must be the thing that I want. And I love that you took it to like, how can I still be involved in sports? And so now my question though is, when you're there waiting for someone to just the security to take you by the shoulders and be like, "What are you doing here, kid?" Like, what did that feel like for you?
It still felt exciting because I was there. I
Yeah.
was living the dream, even if it was ahead of schedule. I just wanted to make sure that I was doing my part. I tend to be a people pleaser. I tend to try to over impress to a fault. I've been told on more than a few occasions in my life that I tend to try too hard. And I think for me, it was almost like, ironically enough, I wanted to blend in at that point. I didn't want to stand out. I just wanted to continue to be a part of this universe that felt so exciting and so vibrant. So, whatever I can do to do that, it is where I wanted to put my focus. As time went on, though, what I realized is that I wasn't getting that same dopamine hit elsewhere. So if I wasn't in the locker room, if I wasn't in the press conference room, if I wasn't interviewing these pro athletes, it didn't feel, I guess, as meaningful.
What
And
what
I,
did
I think that, I'm sorry.
if it wasn't as meaningful, what did it feel like?
It felt like things were slowing down when I wanted them to speed up. I wanted more momentum. I Patience has never been one of my biggest virtues. And at that point, I also had the beginning of some massive FOMO. I always felt like, well, if this isn't generating that excitement for me, then what lies on the other side? And there was just this constant chasing of the shining object, and it led to a lot of distraction. Looking back in hindsight, wound up getting diagnosed later in life with ADD, and it made a ton of sense. It's like, oh, okay, that's why I was always everywhere at once. That's why I could never see things to fruition, because there was always this added thought that would then kind of usurp the thought that I had and then redirect me somewhere else. And looking back, there was just a lot of these untied threads that kept surfacing.
Yeah, I have thoughts about ADHD and ADD and what as the actual cause of it. But one of the things that I'm hearing in your story is that was a common theme for me. It was a common theme for a lot of my clients and a lot of people that I meet. But there's this piece around, here I am living the dream. I got the thing that I wanted. I'm in the press room, I'm in the locker room, I'm living the dream, but there's the space between, and the space between, unless I'm diving fully in, the space between doesn't feel good. It feels like it's moving too slow. I'm not getting the dopamine hit. I'm not getting the rush that I thought the dream was going to give me.
Mm.
And
Yeah, I feel like I peaked too soon. Was part of it, is that success in my mind needed to be linear. It's like, okay, I'm in the locker room. Now I have to have that big profile feature with the top athlete. All right. And then once I have that, then I've got to be on TV doing something, or then I have to have this massive following because, well, shoot, it already started here. I can't go backwards, can I? And that led to a lot of self-doubt, a huge toxic mindset. And because of that, it reflected in a lot of the decisions I made from there. So if I didn't get that cushy newspaper job right out of school, which I didn't necessarily get, then I was a failure. And then I had to find something else to compensate for that, which is exactly what I did, which led down this 20-year plus slippery slope when it came to my career.
so you didn't get the newspaper job right out of the gate. So what did you start? What was the slippery slope? What were you doing during that time?
Okay, strap in. All
All
right.
right, I'm
So,
ready. I'm ready. And for the record, I just want to say, Be the Wolf is all about sharing the vulnerable truth, because a lot of people come on these shows and they give us all the shiny package version of who they are and who they're trying to present to the world, everything they're supposed to be. But what I found is that people fall in love with you for the messy parts.
Mm,
And so it's thank you, one, for
mhm.
letting us strap in and go on this ride with you. And two, for those of you listening, it's important to be able to speak your truth and what's real because so many people are just putting forth this shiny version of what they think they're supposed to be. And then that's not relatable. And then it makes us feel like, oh my God, there's something wrong with me because I'm not here yet, because I didn't go that perfect way that it seemed to go for that other person. So I think it's just so important to share these stories and to hear them so that people know they're not alone.
So well put, Janaea. And I've come to discover that vulnerability has become one of my superpowers. I've always prided myself on being a very authentic person, but I wasn't necessarily because I would omit some of those warts and some of those blind spots. But you hit it right on the head where that's the most relatable part. You know,
Yeah.
people can't relate to a flawless character, and that's what I work with as well with my clients, is that I encourage them to put it all out there because that's what's going to capture the attention of the people that they most want to influence and impact.
Yeah.
So yeah, I couldn't agree more. So graduate college, and I already mentioned the fact that patience was never one of my biggest virtues. So about a month in after graduation and looking for that, that big time beat reporter position where I'm covering a professional team day to day. It didn't happen. Another opportunity came to me where I had the chance to serve as a leadership consultant for my fraternity, where I would get the chance to travel all over the country, visit over 100 different schools. It was super cool. And I justified it because, all right, well, it's a finite period. It's 2 years. It's almost like, the gap years that people tend to do, where they'll go overseas or
Yeah.
they'll just kind of find themselves or sow their royal oats, or however you want to phrase it. And I did. And it was indeed a fantastic experience. At the end of those 2 years, once again, that dopamine hit fell. It's like, well, hey, I'm not traveling all over the country a couple times a week and seeing all these amazing sites and having all these amazing interactions. Now what? Well, again, I started seeking out the sports jobs and the newspaper gigs, and there were a few that presented themselves, but I'd say that my pride got in the way. It was these podunk towns in the middle of nowhere, USA, and I'd start by covering co-ed recreational ping pong or something like that, and I just couldn't justify it. I mean, a couple of years prior, I was interviewing Jacksonville Jaguars on the field after a game. How can I now resort myself to something like that? So I didn't. And then another opportunity came along because of my time traveling as a leadership consultant to go back to grad school and serve as a graduate advisor for Greek life at the University of Miami. And they would pay for that. And I decided, why not? I mean, Miami's certainly not a podunk town. It's actually a very fun town. And I knew I didn't want to go back for journalism because I felt redundant. And unless I was going to teach later on, it didn't make sense to get a master's in journalism. Spoiler alert, I did wind up teaching later. But instead, as mentioned, another passion of mine was film and TV. So I wound up getting my master's in film and TV with a focus on screenwriting, since I already knew I had a knack for that part. So I did that. After the first year, I was never more depressed or more lost than ever before. And I think a big part of that was imposter syndrome. I
Tell me
was going
more.
to grad school.
Tell me more about like, you think a big part of it was imposter syndrome. In what
Absolutely.
way? Tell me more.
Well, it was a big come down to spend 2 years traveling all over the continent, actually, because I went to a couple schools in Canada. So, and being in this role where I was serving as a guide, as a mentor, as an advisor. And by the way, even that was tough because I'm only a year or two or three older years older than these college students that I'm advising, thinking, well, what gives me the right? So the seed was already planted, even
Right.
in those 2 years, even if I buried it deep because I was doing these things that I felt were making an absolute impact. But now that was completely stripped away. And I was like the black sheep because I'm going into grad school And immediately I discovered that all these other grad students had already gone to film school for undergrad. They had gone to these reputable institutions. They had this head start. They were really at the top of their game. And I felt like I had to play a little catch up, not only to make sure that I was on track to do what I needed to do to graduate and propel that into something, but also socially to keep up. I did not fit in. It was hard for me to figure out how to fit in because I always had a bit of an introverted nature to me. But I think that was magnified after 2 years of basically being on my own, traveling thousands of miles in a car. And this was prior to social media. So I really didn't have a lifeline. I didn't have some sort of outlet to connect with other people. And I feel like I kind of, that muscle atrophy.
Mm.
Again, I mentioned that I tend to try too hard at times. And I think that's exactly what I was doing in grad school as well. It's like, hey, look at me. Can I fit in? Can I be that cool kid with you? And it wasn't working out for obvious reasons. It was just, I'm sure it was a bit off putting. So the combination of that and this inner monologue of, I don't belong here, I don't fit in here. Even Miami is just, if you've been, it's a lot, it's sensory overload. And it made it really difficult for me to adapt. And by the end of year one, I had never been more depressed in my life.
Let's dive in here because this is right. We saw the imposter syndrome creeping up earlier,
Yeah.
right? And here's where it's really coming full fledged. Like now you've put yourself in a situation where it's completely new. It's film. You've spent your life doing sports and writing. And even if you were you really interested in film?
Oh, I was for
Okay.
sure.
So totally interested in film. But there's this sense that, oh, I'm behind. And the issues, the imposter syndrome and the feeling of not belonging and all of that stuff starts way sooner than when we become aware of it.
Hmm.
The like insecurity, the, oh, I have to do it right. And so when you were in that place in the film school, and being around all the film students, and I've been around a lot of film students, as a very big generality here, there is a certain aura about people who are studying film. What was it specifically about you that you felt didn't belong and didn't fit in with them?
That's a great question. I'd say I wasn't speaking their language per se. There was a certain baked in community that I just didn't feel like I was a part of. Again, most of them came from a film or a performance background.
Yeah.
It wasn't like I was coming 180 degrees differently. I mean, sports, there's a performative aspect to that. So there was that, but I felt it was really difficult to connect and relate. And I felt alone. And again, as mentioned, the seeds were kind of planted even during my time traveling because even then, I've always been a people person. I've always liked to connect, even though there might have been an introverted nature to me. I always loved being kind of at least part of a tribe.
Right.
That's what kind of energized me. And even in those 2 years traveling, that was taken from me because there was a new tribe a couple times a week. And anytime I would make a connection, then it was like, all right, well, it was nice to meet you. Now gotta go. And then it was off to the next thing. So it also it kind of reminded me of one of my favorite shows growing up as a kid. Did you ever watch Quantum Leap? I know
Yeah,
they've rebooted it since then.
totally.
That was me. It's like I would hop into this body and into this new world and this new community, and I'd make a connection, I'd make an impact. And then once I felt like I did my job, I was off to the next adventure. And although it was validating, it was also extremely lonesome.
Mhm.
And that carried over. I thought that grad school would be the remedy to that. I'd now be in a stable environment. I'd now have this like-minded community, and it just didn't pan out that way. So kind of reinforced my belief of maybe it's me. Maybe it's something that I'm doing wrong. Maybe I'm just less than. And the more that those negative thoughts would resurface without me having some sort of answer to rebut that, to counter that, then the more it reinforced it as well.
I'm curious if we go back in your timeline, we go back to when you were playing sports, right? It's being playing sports is such a big thing about being part of the
Yeah.
tribe, being like belonging. But you had said, I'm too short, I'm not fast enough. So even then, there was this place
Oh, for
that
sure.
I'm on the outskirts of the team. And even as a reporter, you were still part of the tribe, but still on the outskirts of the team. So there's this pattern of being on the outskirts. And even as a kid, as a latchkey kid, be spending all this time alone, it's like I'm on the outskirts of the things that are happening. So there definitely is that pattern showing up.
Oh, for
And
sure.
and when you feel that way, I mean, when you feel like you're on the outside, the natural thing as kids is to think that there's something wrong with me as
Mhm.
a kid. And so oftentimes we have that wound inside of us. And then perpetually we end up in situations that are kind of similar. And they're like, hello, little wound. Do you remember me? I'm still in here.
Oh, yeah, yeah. When I look back, the dots absolutely connect. It didn't feel like it at the time because I was in a new surrounding. I was in a new role, new environment. So how can I still have these old mindsets? I've reinvented myself in a way. So why isn't it providing a different result, at least internally?
Right. Yeah. I mean, and that's a big key right there, as you said, internally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the huge thing. And that's what I've come to learn is that success is a mindset. It is not what you have on paper. It's not status. It's intangible. It's even subjective. And that's a good thing. Because now, I mean, I'll fast forward to today real quickly. I feel like I'm more successful than I've ever been. And it might not look like that on the outside to some people. And, I'll give you some comparative timeframes here. So 8 years ago, I was making more than double the income that I'm making now. And I was absolutely miserable. I was working for a company that, again, looked great on paper, but was, I guess, for lack of a better term, ethically challenged or
Right.
being a man of integrity. That kind of wore me right there. Let's see, 6 years ago, I was in my dream home. I was in that cool position on paper, but on my birthday, I woke up to a panic attack. And now I'm more at peace than ever. 5 years ago, I got separated in the middle of COVID, and now I'm married to the love of my life. 3 years ago, I thought I might have just months to live. I was misdiagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Talk about a
Wow.
turning point moment and putting things in perspective. And now I'm in the best health and the best shape of my life. And you can't put any dollar amount to that.
Yeah.
So it really is perspective when you give yourself the chance to look back and see how things have evolved. Now, at this point, you know what success is to me? It's real freaking simple. It's health, it's happiness, and it's peace. Okay. And I'm healthier than ever, I'm happier than ever, and I'm more at peace than ever. And I'm doing things that I love. Even if it doesn't reflect in the bank account the way that it once did, it might at some point. And even if it doesn't, okay, here I am. And I'm loving what I do. And you can't put a price tag on that. I'm very blessed for that because I didn't always feel that way. There was always that, but what if? What would other people say? And I didn't get to live out that quote unquote dream that I thought I was meant for. And this wasn't my destiny. And there would always be these buts and, howevers. And I would make excuses for the things I didn't have instead of embracing the things that were coming to me. And I still believe that I'm in the middle of my own comeback story. I've come a long way, but it doesn't mean that I'm already at my happily ever after. And that's also really exciting to know that I'm part of a journey that's already paying off as opposed to just looking back and kicking up my heels. So that gives me the inspiration and the motivation to keep driving forward anyway.
Yeah. And one of the things, so we have this like history of the imposter syndrome, and you had these jobs that were
Mm,
not so great. You were making good money, but you were not happy, you were miserable, you had a big health scare, and all that stuff is, I think it's like the universe trying to like nudge you, hey, you're going the wrong way, going the wrong way.
yeah.
But
Mhm.
as you really look and start to embrace that mindset of success. And people, mindset is a big buzzword, right? It's like, oh, mindset is everything. La, 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 la. But what I think people don't realize, a part of mindset, like, yes, it's the thoughts that we're thinking. Oh, I have imposter syndrome. Oh, I have like da, da, da. But people don't think about the emotional tie to the thoughts that they're thinking. Like every thought you have affects every cell in your body. And the emotions that you have are chemical responses in the body that also affect every cell, and they affect every single decision. And so I'm curious, when you made the decision to go to grad school for film, when you made that decision, what was your emotional state? Because it led to being really depressed. But were you super excited about it? Were you coming from this place of, oh, life is great? Or were you coming from this place of, oh, this is the best thing I have?
I believe I was super excited about that one because, again, it was a passion of mine and it felt like a viable pivot. All right, I can't get that cushy sports job yet. But
Right.
in the meantime, I can get my school paid for and do something that I find really enjoyable. I get to go to school and watch movies and talk and write about them. Well, sign me up.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, it didn't lead to the contentment and happiness that I wanted. And actually, I know the reasons. I mean, I didn't feel like I fit in. I didn't feel like I was making an impact. I would come back home from class and this crappy pool house that was infested with termites and just sit with my thoughts. And that was not a good thing at that time because those thoughts continued to get more and more negative to the point where I started believing it because I had no counter. So it wasn't at that point where I felt like I was just doing something to justify a means to an end. It wasn't until after I graduated that kind of started. So after I graduated and half my class made the mass exodus out to Hollywood, I chickened out and stayed back.
Mm,
I was fearful of what if I don't make it. I used the excuse of I had adopted a cat between my first and second year. And I'm so glad I did because then I actually felt purposeful. It's like, all right, I'm caring for another living being. Some other living being is relying on me.
yeah.
And that felt really good. But then I also use that as an excuse. I can't take my cat cross country going couch surfing while I try to make ends meet and try to slip my script underneath some producer's cafe latte. I can't do that to my cat. So I didn't. But then I decided I was going to go back to journalism, pursue that. And I was a freelancer and worked with the Associated Press. And that was a great value add for me. But I couldn't break in full time. I didn't pass the test. And then that's when I started to feel like I had to do something. And that was kind of the first detour, the first real detour in my career. So I wound up getting a job at a recruiting firm. It was the most boring job I've ever had in my life. I was basically just on the phone cold calling all day, trying to pitch our services to industries that didn't interest me, to people who weren't interested in me. And that lasted all about a year. But it also perhaps was a double edged sword because it gave me some proof of concept in the corporate world that I had some level of ability and knack for it, and it led to other sales and marketing jobs that I wound up taking later on because I felt like I had to. So
Right.
you fast forward a few more years and I wound up starting a family with my then wife. I felt like I needed to become the provider. And at that point, I was barely making it as a freelance journalist, even though I was doing things that I did enjoy. For example, I was a columnist for Bleacher Report, if you're familiar with them. But that was, they say timing's everything. That was prior to them handsomely compensating their writers. It was more of a vanity ad.
Yeah.
I was an adjunct professor, as mentioned, where I was teaching writing, and I enjoyed that. But again, very part time, very low paying. And it was also at institutions where it seemed like all the other professors were tenured for life. So good luck breaking in full time
Right.
there. So again, that was kind of where I started feeling like I was on the cusp. There were things that were lurking that made me feel like, all right, things could happen here that could set things off, but they're not happening. And I feel like the scarcity mindset started playing out, and I felt like I was on the clock. Well, hey, if we want to start a family, how can I justify that with doing all these things and barely making ends meet?
Yeah.
So yeah, I took the sales gig and I took what I felt was the safe route.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people do that, right? And I think when you're following your dreams and you're following what's right for you, there's this concept that you have to step off the cliff and trust that the universe is going to rise to meet you. And that's a scary freaking thing, especially if like your background was unstable. And by unstable, I mean not consistent, unpredictable, not having a parent at home all the time, things like that. And I don't necessarily mean like there are people who can have lots of money and whatever and
Mhm,
still have that thing. You could have a parent with anxiety and
mhm.
that becomes it's an unstable energy, right? It's
Yeah,
not consistent. And so when you don't have that history of consistent in your foundation, oftentimes to trust in that blind step is really scary. So you moved away from the things that you were really loving. And it sounds like the mindset got worse and worse.
it did. Yeah, I was spending years tying my worth to external validation, income, status, approval, doing the quote unquote responsible thing.
Right.
And the longer that I stayed in those positions and stayed in those circumstances, the more I resented it and the more I resented myself. And the dreams that I had just began to slowly and gradually fade away. It was one of those things where, it, like in a movie, and then you fast forward, you flash forward 10 years, and it's like, what just happened? How did
Yeah.
I get here? Why am I not living the life that I had planned and that I had dreamed about and that I thought that I would manifest because I had my sights set on it, but just couldn't figure out a way to break in. And I became very angry. I was angry at myself for not following through. I was angry at others for not giving me the opportunities that I thought that I had deserved. I guess there was a sense of entitlement there. And I was just angry at my lot in life because it wasn't something that was doing for me what I thought I needed to live a fulfilled life. And it sucked.
Do you want to do a little experiment with me?
Let's do it.
Okay. You know, your mindset now is sure, of course, you could have more money and all that, but like you have the health, you have the happiness, you're feeling really good. Like you feel like you have a lot, like you feel like you have abundance. Yes.
I do. And I wouldn't say that's been linear either.
Right.
There have
Right.
been times when I'm at the top of my game from a mindset perspective,
Yeah.
and then inevitably something will happen. It'll knock me off my perch, and I'll have to remind myself of what got me there. And it's an ongoing battle. So,
Yeah.
by all means, I always have that level of hesitation of conveying that I'm in a great place and I'll always be in a great place
Yeah.
because it's just not true, but that's life.
Well, I mean, that's a human thing. I have a really great mindset and still I can get knocked down a little bit from time to time. It's like one of
Mhm.
those little old wounds gets pushed and it's like, hello, I'm still here. Okay. So get yourself in that really great mindset, right? Think of the time when you were like super at the top of your game at that mindset. Or we could do a little time travel. We'll talk about quantum leaping.
Okay. Oh, speaking of,
Okay.
yes.
So, okay. Like, right, I can feel from you that you're feeling that energy of feeling good and feeling like you've got it all. Now let's take that with you and time travel back to film school when you were feeling the way you were feeling, but let's take this mindset with you there instead of having the mindset with you there and just literally like in your mind, you might want to close your eyes to do this. I don't know. But like step into your old self, but with this mindset and tell us how the experience might be different.
I'd be much more comfortable in my own skin. I'd feel confident in my direction to just surrender to the outside circumstances and trust the universe that, hey, I'm doing something that I enjoy. And that's all that should matter. It shouldn't matter if others are giving me credit, if others are bringing me into their circle. if it may or may not lead to what I want, I'd embrace the present moment a lot more.
Yeah. Awesome. And that's the power. You can open your eyes. That's the power of having clear mental and emotional being. It's like when you can hold that, everything else, because your decisions are fed by your emotions, your decisions are fed by your mindset. And so from that place, you would have made very different decisions. Yes.
Oh, for sure. Yeah,
And that would have led to outcomes because our decisions we're living a life of the outcome of our decisions. I'm living decisions that I made 10 years ago, 12 years ago, 6 months ago, yesterday, and you are doing the same. And it's just such a beautiful thing to really drop into your story with your current mindset, to drop into those past places and see how it might have been different. And not that we need to judge the way we were in the past, but just to accept, well, that got us here because those were all the things that I needed to get to actually gain this success mindset that you have now. And
exactly.
so the other thing I like about your story is I, of course, know a bit about what you do. And I think when we are following the things that we love, there are these breadcrumbs along the way that we pick up. We don't understand or know why we're interested in them or why we're doing them or why we're doing this pivot or that pivot. But there's a point in your life where it starts to all come together. And I've seen this time and time again with entrepreneurs where all the pieces begin to make sense. The journalism, the writing, the storytelling, the coaching. I think now is a beautiful time to tell us what you actually do for a living these days, Jeff.
Okay. Yeah. Great segue. Well, and you explained it perfectly because for a long time, I thought that this eclectic, seemingly disconnected path was my flaw. Here was a guy that got laid off or let go repeated times, who was in these positions that had no alignment with what I wanted to ultimately do. And now I see it as the foundation of my purpose. I What I do really is a labor of love that would not have occurred if it were not for all of those fits and spurts within my career. So I help professionals who, like me, are at a crossroads or were at a crossroads in their own personal comeback story. And I help them turn that comeback story into their greatest asset so they can stop hiding behind what they do and start leading with who they are. Those that at one point, like me, felt like they were at the top of their game, that they, were doing what they set out to do. And then for whatever reason, they found themselves at a crossroads. They found themselves at this fork in the road. A great example are former athletes.
Right.
So this was part of my full circle moment where I began working with former athletes and think about their story. All their life, they had this identity. All right, they were the big man on campus, the big woman on campus. They were at the top of their game, literally. They were athletically gifted and in the spotlight, and they get drafted and they have the career that they always wanted. And then one day, the contract runs out and their phone stops ringing, and it's like, what next? And by the way, when that happens, they're at the ripe old age of usually 28, 29.
Yeah.
This isn't like, all right, I can just kind of take up golf and play bingo for the rest of my life and be okay with that. They still have the rest of their lives to live, and they're struggling to figure out how they can leverage these amazing experiences, these amazing stories, these amazing lessons that they learned through that time in that role and parlay that into the next chapter of their lives and their careers. And it could be a very debilitating thing. If you ever spoken to a former athlete and asked them, okay, how did you feel when you had to figure out what you were going to do once your career ended? It is brutal. A lot of depression sets in, a lot of imposter syndrome
Yep.
sets in, using the phrase of the day. And they feel lost. And especially because they don't know who to turn to segment of the audience where they feel like everyone's just trying to put their hand in their pocket and try to take advantage of them because of their status. You have another segment where it's like, all right, you're no longer that athlete. So I don't need to really associate with you anymore. So it makes it difficult to figure out who really has your best interest in mind. So what I do and what I try to do with them and others is really listen to them and understand, all right, what was it about those experiences that you can still take with you and move into that next phase of life? And oftentimes it is a story, and oftentimes it's a story that has a lot of meaning that will give them another aspect of legacy, that'll give them an opportunity to feel purpose driven still and make an impact on others that might have been in a similar position. Now, they might not have been former athletes themselves, but as we've discussed, they can certainly relate because of that level of vulnerability, because of that level of uncertainty, because everyone has those crossroads moments and struggle to figure out what to do with them. So, whether it means a literal next chapter where we help them craft a book, or one of my passion projects was a couple of years ago, I'd helped to adapt a book into a screenplay with a former rock star that just serendipitously happens to live right down the road from me that I was introduced to, or whether it be on the back end where they already have that story crafted, but now are trying to figure out what's the most appropriate platform to shine a spotlight on that. So I'll serve as a broker to help to connect them with the most appropriate audiences, the most appropriate outlets to ensure that it gets in front of the people who need to hear that story the most. So it's been, again, a full circle moment for me where I started out wanting to get involved in sports and in movies, and then had this massive detour where I was just wandering around trying to figure out how to get clarity in my life back. And then it happened almost accidentally where once I decided to get myself out of these toxic situations, out of these work environments that just did not define me, resonate with my passion, that's when I kind of found it, sitting there and saying, well, who are people like you that would generate that same enthusiasm that I once had many moons ago and can still do without having to hit this entire reset button and maybe now take that job writing about co-ed ping pong in Podunk, America. I didn't need to do that. It was already there in front of me.
And the thing that resonates, I think, that you're creating these comeback stories, which of course is you're in a comeback story yourself. And also, there's this thread of understanding that who you are isn't your job, your business, what your title is, what your schooling is. Who you are is just there always if you're willing to access that. And so being able to reframe the old identity of the professional athlete or whatever your old identity was into moving forward, but you're still taking you with you. And that's such a be the wolf thing, is like connecting to the truth of who you are, right? And the truth of who you are is not a fucking imposter because you are you. We just think that we're supposed to be something else other than us. And we get stuck in these roles of I am this, I am that, instead of just being us. And when we are holding that success mindset that you talk about with us, we get to actually bring it forth in every journey, every chapter in our life. How do people
Mm,
get in touch with you? How do people work with you?
absolutely. Yeah, you're welcome to check out my website. It's called Brand Scribed. So like transcribe, but with a B, because that's what I'm doing. As I'm taking your brand, I'm taking your identity, and we're figuring out the best way to make it have the most impact to the people who need to hear it the most. So you can go into www.brandscribe.com, book a call. I would love to hear your story. And I would love to figure out where I can lend some insight and some guidance or point you in the right direction. I hover on LinkedIn. That's probably the social media platform of choice to share some inspiration every now and then. But if you're at a moment right now where you know what you're capable of, you know that there's something deep inside that you're struggling to figure out how to get out, you're not alone. You're never alone. And would love to figure out where we can take these stories because we all have a great story to tell and we all have an audience that needs to hear it and figure out how we can develop that into something that will define a legacy beyond your wildest imagination.
Yeah, and I know you a bit, so if any of this is resonating with you, everybody who's listening, take the leap because Jeff truly likes to help people. That is something that lights him up. I've known him for a minute and I've seen it time and time again. Take
Thank
the
you.
leap. Don't be shy. Don't be like, I need to take care of my cat, so I can't take that leap.
And
So take the leap. And for the rest of you, we will see you next week. And remember, when you operate from the truth of who you are, humanity evolves. We'll see you next time on Be the Wolf. Bye, everyone.